All right, FARTBOY Army, let's break down the chart like we promised and find out what's coming next for price action, all right? Let's start here on the macro. The thing that I want to talk about right now is that we are on the price scale in USD, right? The next thing is we are on log, okay? When we're doing this, what we're looking at is the potential of a 5-wave move to the upside, okay? Here you have a wave 1, 2, and then another hiccup here, which we would call a 1, 2, and then a 3, 4, 3, 4, and final 5th wave, which means the top could be in for FARTBOY on this scale, right? If we're on log scale and we're going by some simple rules and guidelines. After a 5-wave move up in Elliot Wave, the unfortunate thing is that we typically do see a retracement, which comes around 50% to even sometimes that 702 area, right? So this would be a really deep cut for FARTBOY. So let's look at some of the internal fair value gaps or liquidity that we could have here and talk about exactly how these could affect support as price comes down. So there's one. This one's all the way cleared up. As you could see, when we wicked down, we completely took all the liquidity out of this internal fair value gap. You can kind of call this internal fair value gap because it's comprised of 3 candles, right? They're all closing upwards, all 3 of them, so unidirectional, and this long body left an unchecked segment in there. You can see price action did a long lingering chop, took all of it back, and then closed up and out of the fair value gap, which was bullish, right? Then we can see a final possible 5 waves within the wave 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Boom. Right? Then it comes into our extensions that we have here at play, and we'll go back and talk about these also. So after that possible 5-wave move to the upside, and what you should note and what I'm noting is the bearish divergence here, right? So we received higher closures on price action, meaning the actual candle bodies close higher. The RSI made a significantly lower high. That's on the daily, so that is something to take note of. And at the same time, we saw our highest volume in our wave 3, and then a decrease in the buyers and kind of that excitement in the project as it went into wave 5, right? That kind of tapered off. So these are things that give us momentum divergence and the possibility of a top being in. So if we were to see something like this, this move to the downside could possibly be a leading diagonal, right? So it could be the very first thing that's taking things to the downside. We'll go zoom in and talk about this and talk about where we may or may not see invalidation as we come along for this, okay? So as this moves down in a leading diagonal, it can be made in one of 2 ways, right? So the first way is going to be in a regular leading diagonal style. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in the new rules of a diagonal, you don't have to even have overlap anymore, so do keep that in mind. Your wave 3 in a diagonal can now be slightly longer than your wave 1, but you really don't want to see your wave 5 get longer than your 3, okay? So the other way a leading diagonal could be made is the way that we're looking at here, and that would be 3 waves in a possible wave 1, 3 waves in a possible wave 2, 3 waves in a possible wave 3, and again 3 waves in a possible wave 4, right? Then it ends in 3 waves in a possible wave 5. So that is the other way a leading diagonal can be made. So do keep that in mind. Now, let's go look at it with some extensions and talk about kind of where our invalidation point is and when we're going to have to shift this count to something different, right? So if this is our 3 and we don't want our 5 to be bigger than our 3, well, right now we're slightly bigger than it, right? So it's not a rule, it's a guideline. But like seeing these lows lost with any sort of intensity or confidence, that 0.5225 area, and you should consider this project is going to make a much stronger move to the downside, right? And at that point, we might recount this section and say, you know, maybe something bigger to the downside was coming on. So we'll get there as price action progresses, but do refer to your daily time frame for what we expect to be support, right? So we do have that fair value gap there as a lower retracement, and we have another one here that we can see. right? So these are things that typically get refilled. And it's a reason why price action could come down there, right? So we could sweep this external liquidity, move into the internal liquidity, and then maybe FARTBOY could see a bounce. If this is to be a leading diagonal to the downside, and let's say the low is in here, right? All my fellow nerds, go ahead and LARP with me or live action role play if you can. And let's talk about where we could see a retracement to, right? So if that was an A wave to the downside, let's make sure our fibs are on log scale. And our chart is on log scale, okay. Then we would look for some sort of 3-wave move to the upside into a B wave common retracement area, right? So here's the wonky thing about B waves. You can have expanded B waves. That's the most typical area of retracement. You could have the minimum target for a B wave in a flat. That's here. Or you could have what we would call like a normal B wave retracement, right? So that would be something like this, where it comes up, doesn't ever break out past 7802, 786, and then it gives that last leg to the downside, right? So that would be something we would be looking at. Now, if something were like this to occur, you would want to be aware of it only making a 3-wave motion to the upside. So if it makes a 3-wave motion to the upside, the big thing we're going to be on the lookout for is hidden bear, right? So if price action barely comes up, but the RSI really starts coming up quickly, expect that to be just a bearish retracement, okay? And we could talk more about that later. But so here we note that FARTBOY is in a falling channel, right? So with last points of resistance here noted, and you can see that these correspond really well with the 618 and the 786 and around that 888 area, excuse me. So usually these last points of resistance, as it was in that falling pattern, will become resistances as price action moves up. So let's be watching this 12 cents. Let's be watching this 15 cents like hawks. If we're getting hidden bearish divergence and a 3-wave move with a big green candle spike of volume, right? Just like you see here and here, well, then we're going to expect a pullback, right? All right, so that covers everything for this local would-be bearish scenario. But overall, it's bullish, right? Because after a pullback, we get a really big move. So let's stay positive. So let's move to linear. Let's delete everything and restart the conversation. And I just want to show you guys the difference between log and linear, just so you see it, okay? So here's our linear chart, right? Boom, boom, boom. Here's our log chart. It is a very different chart, okay? So for this analysis, let's go ahead and look at linear also. So if we're looking at linear and we're being the optimistic person here, and we try to not see this as just a 3-wave move to the upside, meaning if this whole thing was a wave 2, we typically like to see a wave 2 and a wave 4 match in time, right? So if this was your wave 4, wow, guys, we're way too long, right? The next thing we would also like to see is that a wave 4 doesn't drop past the 0.5 retracement, right? So if we pull from a possible low of a 2 to the high of a maybe 3, well, dude, we're way at a 786 and we've got overlap with old price action. These are bearish things, right? So let's turn this off. Now, if we wanted to continue down the live action role play road and we wanted to say, hey, you know, maybe this was wave 1 and 2, and then it has a really good 3 and a short 4 and a 5. Regardless, that still means a possible 5-wave count would be in, right? So let's place these on just so we can see it. Right? Then still a 5-wave count is in, right? So after a 5-wave count, what do we wait for? We wait for a decent retracement back to the golden pocket. Well, when we're on linear, we're already here, right? We saw a 618, then a 702 reaction. In my opinion, if you're wanting to be a bull on this project and you're wanting to see it go to the moon, then you're going to have to argue this as your scenario. And you're going to have to say, okay, well, that was 5 waves in A or 1. And this was a pullback in B or 2 that does not lose the 786, okay? and then you would be shooting for a C. Now, what would make me lean towards a B versus a 2? Let's go look at the time in correction, because I think that'll be most important. So I'm going to put it on from around about here. Let's see where our low's at. About there is just fine. For time's sake, we're not going to include this little blob. And we'll go up here and give it a double click. And we can see that we're past, let me turn off the volume so we can see really well. We are past the minimum time in correction of a 382, right? So if this is a 5-wave move to the upside, happy days. We're past the 382. Now, if this were to continue correcting out here and get way over here, excuse my click, to the 2 line, then we would call it a B, right? But as it's correcting right now, it's getting it over with really quickly. So if it ends sooner than later, I would love to keep this count as a 1 and this as a 2, right? I really wouldn't want to see current lows lost. And if they were, I would love to see a bounce at the 786, which is at 0.04289. Now, this is where I think the bulls are going to get excited, right? Is when we start talking about these next targets. So if this is going to be a wave 3, 4, and 5 to the upside, let's talk about what that would look like. So if this was a wave 1 to the peaks and a wave 2 to the speculative low, let's say it goes to the 786 first, then I would fully look for, let's go ahead and put on our impulsive extensions because we won't need all these guys because FARTBOY is going to be bullish, right? That's what we're all hoping for. So this would take us up into our targets, right? So this would be a wave 3, 4, and 5. But let's be honest, if it's a true meme coin and if it has a strong community like I think it does, I think that you would see an extended wave for the 3rd wave, right? So what we could see there is 5 up here, 3 gets up to the 2.618 or even the 3.618 is what we could consider. And then 5 comes in and then 4, right? So I do think in these scenarios, this is how you could see a really, really extended strong FARTBOY, okay? But this would be my main bullish scenario here would be that we would want to see this reversal coming in strong. We would want to see volume coming in. We need FARTBOY to turn around and blast off like it just had a can of beans. So who's with me, guys? Let's see what comes next. Thank you for your time. See you out there.